Ben Burgess. He is the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. He's a professor at Georgia State Perimeter College. He's also now a regular columnist for The Jacobin. And his new piece, apropos of dunking on David Brooks, is a free press is too important to trust to the free market. Ben, are you there? Thanks for being here. Excuse me. A free press is too important to trust capitalists with.
That would have been a better title when you just did that.
I know. I sexed it up for you a little bit, but unfortunately,
run these titles by you.
I would do that.
Bhaskar definitely should have used that.
Isn't that better though? A free press is too important to trust the free market.
Yeah, it's better. We got it. Yeah, we got it. We can move on.
I literally thought that was the title.
Do I come here and tell you how to do your job?
Well,
kind of.
Yeah, you do. And you are literally here, and I'm not at the Jacobin offices. None of this works, Bhaskar. Ben, what do you got for us today? We have not made fun of David Brooks nearly enough on this show. By the way, I think hilariously that Movado, who is one of my favorite artists right now, I think his birth name is David Brooks, which is hysterical.
Yeah.
Interesting. You could not imagine a bigger contrast than people there. And of course we have the Ben. As always, I got to ask you, Ben.
Okay.
How excited are you for your theme music?
Extremely fucking excited.
You're gonna show us. Just be careful with the demonetization. Go.
This is based on data from a bunch of different countries. There's abundant evidence that at this point that's bullshit. Breaking down these right-wing arguments and looking at how they're supposed to fit together.
Break it down. All right, Ben Burgess, you're of course you're in the building, metaphorically speaking and literally auditorily. What do you have for us on the Debunk this week?
Yeah, so this is going to be an article by David Brooks, who is surely the best living proof you could ask for that a free press is, in fact, to use the better title, too important to leave to the free market. Because when you have newspapers like the New York Times, the whole media that's in the hands of the plutocrats, you get these just bizarre mediocrities who get like the best media posts in the world. It's clearly a bad system. But in any case, in his column, it was the column before last that he wrote for the New York Times. He's praising Elizabeth Warren. He's praising past Elizabeth Warren. He rues the fact that since then, in more recent years, she's moved further to the left. But he's praising past Elizabeth Warren after she had her big bankruptcy epiphany, after she was already a liberal, for having been like heterodox and unpredictable, and taking some right-wing positions. And he's laying out the case for those positions and sort of clucking about the fact that since then she's become much more of a predictable lib.
Right. And so what specifically did Elizabeth Warren used to support in the aughts that David Brooks is so bummed that she's not still trying to push forward?
Charter schools, for one. The fact the subtitle of what they had up for a while was back when
Elizabeth Warren agreed with Betsy DeVos.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a good title, Bhaskar.
Yep. Which, of course, from David Brooks' perspective, it's a shame that she no longer agrees with Betsy DeVos because he thinks Betsy DeVos is right. She has. And so she advocated vouchers back then, and she also opposed universal state-sponsored daycare. And her argument, which Brooks endorses, he still thinks this is a good argument against this, which is actually one of the most important reforms that we could institute, certainly from a gender equality point of view. But is that back then she called taxpayer-funded daycare a liberal sacred cow. Quote, any subsidy that benefits working parents without providing a similar benefit to single-income families pushes the stay-at-home mother and her family further down the economic ladder. So I've got to say, as I read this, I'm just imagining Elizabeth Warren explaining to some like first generation immigrant woman with a job cleaning hotel rooms that she can't get daycare because that would give her like comparative privilege over stay-at-home moms.
Right, exactly. And what does this show, though, in terms of the broader fallacy of this technocratic, and it's can be right-wing neoliberal like Betsy DeVos, or progressive neoliberal like Elizabeth Warren, of slicing and dicing things up into divisive small-scale programs that don't deliver the same results and create political and social division?
Yeah, well, I mean, it shows exactly that. So what they think, right? What people like this really prioritize, right? Of course, they love unpredictability. Of course, that's something they really prioritize in itself. And of course, you had Christopher Hitchens on in the first segment, and I've got to say, whenever I see people, praising how amazing it is that when people are being unpredictable and heterodox, I always think, if you just indulge me for a second, there's this Christopher Hitchens quote from the 80s that is just fantastic, among other reasons, because it sounds like he's critiquing his own future self.
Right. I'm ready.
He says, I have never been able, except in my lazier moments, to employ the word predictable as a term of abuse. Speaking purely for myself, I would be alarmed if my knee failed to respond to a certain stimuli. It would warn me of a loss of nerve. I have written in the past year about the MX missile, constructive engagement. He lists some other issues. Naturally, I hope my arguments were original, but I would be depressed to think that anyone who knew me or my stuff could not have easily predicted the line I would take. In the charmed circle of neoliberal and neoconservative journalism, however, unpredictability is the special emblem and certificate of self-congratulation. To be able to bray that as a liberal, I say bomb the shit out of them, is to achieve that eye-catching, versatile marketability that is so beloved of editors of talk show hosts. Wow. As a lifelong socialist, I say don't bomb the shit out of them. See what I mean? It lacks the sex appeal somehow. Predictable as hell.
Jesus Christ. It's like Mussolini in 1910.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
That's insane, because that's one of the best pieces of writing, and that is like he even picked the exact issue set he would become an absolute asshole over. Anyways.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they really like unpredictability.
But to be fair, by the end, he predictably would say bomb the shit out of them. But at any rate, go ahead.
Right. Yes. Exactly. He got very one note about it. So yeah, look, these people love unpredictability, and they also love complexity for the sake of complexity. That if you just say, I'm going to forgive all student loan debt because student loan debt is the thing that shouldn't exist, well, that's not very nuanced, right? That's just a very broad brush. Whereas if you say, as even Elizabeth Warren now does, much less her positions back then, up to this income threshold, we'll forgive it. Between here and here, maybe we'll do 50%. Then, that seems to be much more serious to people like this. And really, one of the things that I think is most important about the absurdity of this Brooks piece, and certainly the absurdity of Elizabeth Warren back when she wrote this back when she wrote this article.
And I think it was The Two-Parent Trap. It was a book, I think.
Yeah, The Two-Parent Trap. She co-wrote it with her daughter.
Right.
So at that time, right, in the 90s, she was saying she was also very opposed to the government writing what she called a blank check for higher education. And so certainly it's not totally clear which policies she had in mind, but certainly it sounds like she'd be opposed to just completely abolishing tuition at public universities, which she's still somewhat opposed to, right? She's still not full Bernie Sanders on that. But here's her argument against that, and the quote from The Two-Income Trap. The more taxes approach suffers for the same problem the more debt approach engenders. It gives colleges more money to spend without any attempt to control their spiraling costs. And as I was reading that, all I could think is, oh my God, this sounds exactly like what, the most annoying kind of wonky neoliberal always says about single payer. The kind of person who says, I'm not necessarily even against single payer. Maybe it is a good idea, but let's not pretend it's a panacea because there are all these other costs to the system. And, as long as we still have fee for service, this wouldn't really solve all that stuff. And in both cases, it's bullshit for the same reason, which is that you don't really have to be a genius economist to get the point that if you have a single payer in a system, that payer has a lot more bargaining power than any payer has in a multi-payer system. So if Medicare is the only insurance provider, then all those other costs throughout the healthcare system, they're in a position to do a lot more about because they're a much better position to dictate what they're going to pay for. And similarly with universities, look, universities there are lots of reasons for spiraling costs. A lot of it has to do with bureaucratic, corporatized administrations that just keep getting bigger and bigger. But again, if public universities went from relying on a combination of tuition and state aid to just state aid, other than I guess whatever they could get from alumni, then the state would be in a much better position to dictate how much they would be willing to pay, what they'd be willing to pay for. So this kind of thing, I don't know, but what about the costs, right? If we're just writing a blank check, then the costs will go out of control. What's going to incentivize them to worry out the cost is the kind of thing that sounds smart to somebody who's attuned to the signs of capital S seriousness. Right. But actually, the more you think about it, the less sense it makes.
Well, and the last thing I'll say real quick before we wrap up and see if you guys want to chime in for a second as well. I mean, it's very funny that this whole column is predicated on it used to be interesting when she held all of these right-wing positions, which it's I would imagine that you would prefer she have right-leaning positions because you're right-wing. So, okay. He's trying to rebrand it as heterodox, but it's just right. You were right. I preferred when Christopher Hitchens was a anti-war socialist. Right. Stop the presses. And then the second part is, it isn't that she's actually, she still has this tendency. That's why her student relief program, doesn't do the full job that Sanders does, but she's upgraded and gotten better because of the changing political dynamics and because of her evolving understanding of policy. And that all is more sound. So Brooks can't say here's a reason why, sort of empirically or ethically, why she's deviated. It's just it just used to be interesting, man.
Yes,
which is,
exactly.
Again, just like his own lazy, capital S, pseudo-serious nonsense and bias. Does anybody else have anything to add to this debunk of not having universal programs?
I feel like he wanted the title to be When Elizabeth Warren Agreed with David Brooks. But he didn't have the guts to put his name in there.
Yes, I agree.
So
I totally agree
corny.
with that.
I have a game if we want to play it before we let Ben on.
Yes, let's do it.
It's an impromptu game. This is called which I don't want to say 80s pop star, but
Brooks.
beginning in the 80s.
That's one possibility, allegedly.
This is which music star had a great Ayn Rand take recently. So I'm going to read the take, and then you guys can guess who it was. And they were big in the 80s and deceased in the last 5 years, I'll say.
Okay.
So here we go. The Fountainhead. Did you read that? What did you think of it? Oh wait, that's the journalist saying that. He says, "We need a book that talks to the aristocrats, not just to the fans. We have to dismantle the Fountainhead brick by brick." I'm missing some of this quote. Hold on one second here. It's like the aristocrats' Bible. It's a compound of problems. They basically want to eliminate paradise. We should attack the whole notion of supremacy. Who is that?
David Bowie?
You're not going to give us 3 options?
No.
Just throw a name out.
Well, Bowie would have been one of the options I gave that was wrong.
Oh, it's wrong. Damn.
Okay, all right. Not David Bowie.
Anybody else?
George Michael.
No.
We died in
Prince.
the last few years.
Michael Jackson.
Waylon Jennings.
Ben got it. It's Prince.
Prince. Prince is so good on everything.
Prince is a smart dude.
He was a smart dude.
You know, Nas recently said in an interview, I forget what show it was on, but basically like Prince was willing to collaborate with him when Nas owned his masters, and it re-engineered like his whole understanding of how to do the business. And that was like something that everybody thought like, oh, this is part of like Prince is so eccentric, he's so weird, he owns his own record rights. What a weirdo! It's like, oh, yeah, it's actually a pretty good idea. Ben Burgess, the author, is Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. He's a professor of logic and logic-like things at Perimeter College at Georgia State University, as well as being a regular columnist for the Jacobin, as well as presiding over a really good Patreon, which you should sign up for. Ben, thank you.
Thank you.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.